Folks, we're back. This is Steve Sanson, Jim Jones with another episode of Veterans in Politics. Today we have Alan Lefebvre, candidate for Clark County District Court Judge Department 14. But before we get to Mr. Lefebvre, Jim, you have any rants?
No, actually, don't have any rants. Just something that I wanted to state to everybody that, well, for all the viewers and listeners, is so today, August 14th, would have been my grandma Rosie's 94th birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she passed away last summer, and thank goodness I was able to be back in Wyoming, in that part of the country, and was able to attend her funeral. And I just want to say to all the viewers and listeners, like, really pay attention to your elders and what they teach you and how special they are actually to you. Because growing up, when we were young kids, my mom and dad did an exceptional job at making sure we had food and clothes and the stuff we needed. But there was nothing greater than going to Grandma Rosie's house in Rapid City. She would take us to Kmart, and she would buy us clothes, and she would always buy me new bike tube tires. And yeah, it was this.
How you remember the stuff those little things that your grandparents did for you?
Yeah, no, it was cool because we never actually had to have fun unless we went to Grandma's house. And when we went to Grandma's house, but the interesting part about my Grandma Rosie that I always like is when people say, "Oh, well, grandparents spoil you." Well, my grandma didn't spoil us. Oh, she'd be the first one to complain, or not complain, but say, "Hey, you need to straighten up. Like, you need to listen to your mom and dad." So I just wanted to just say that for my Grandma Rosie. She was a very important figure in my life. Mm-hmm. And like, I should probably be more articulate in what I'm saying right now, but emotions are overcoming me a little bit. But I just wanted to say that. So no rants. I just think that people...
Happy birthday to Grandma Rosie.
Yeah, and I think people need to start respecting their elders more. And I think that's something that we're having a problem with in today's society, is my opinion.
All right. Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't really have one today. If you know what happens when I start opening my mouth, right? We go all day long. So
yeah, well, me too in large part. I just wanted to make sure that I got that out there for Grandma Rosie. So,
but I want to talk to Mr. Lefebvre. How you doing today, sir?
Good. How are you, Steve?
Doing good. Could you tell us about you? You see the difference between the panel endorsement and then coming on the show? You get me. I don't know if that's going to be good or bad.
Okay.
Let's see.
There's no seatbelt here.
Let's see what happens. So, your bio, please.
Yeah, I I was raised all over the place from Colorado to Idaho.
Were you military brat?
No, my father was a school administrator. And usually they last about 5 years before they get fired. And so then we got to see a lot of the country.
Why is that?
Well, just like here.
You mean administrator for school?
Right.
Yeah.
So, you look at all the Clark County School District superintendents, same thing, they last 5 years.
And then they got to go.
Right. And then it's like city managers.
Uh-huh.
And I guess the boards get to know you too well. So my dad was a World War II veteran. He was shot up very badly during the Battle of the Bulge. Okay. Lived with a war injury that he wouldn't get fixed.
Which was?
Had his knee blown apart.
Okay. Was he limping?
Yeah, it was very, very painful. Of all things, the doctor talked him into getting a complete heart valve rework at age 80. But so then he did live to be 94, 95. But he would never get this knee fixed. And that is a deteriorated, it was just bone on bone, huh? And so is it...
they said that's one of the most painful is your knee and getting shot in your knee and getting shot in your stomach.
Oh, I would guess.
Yeah, but in your knee, if you get shot in your knee, you'll never be able to run again. You're going to be limping for the rest of your life.
Right. And even after knee surgery, it's real hard to run. So anyway, he was a veteran. They were real poor people. Their parents, though, they lived out on a farm, and all they did is rock. Minnesota, just a bunch of rocks and trees.
Kind of like J.D. Vance with what they call it,
hillbilly elegy.
You gonna have a movie coming out next?
No. So anyway, my grandfather was illiterate. He spoke only French. He was French Canadian.
Okay.
And he was, in essence, a itinerant farm worker. He went. He had his own little 40 acres, and then he went to a place called Candu, North Dakota, and managed a rich man from Germany's. I guess it was. They call them sections, and he had 4 sections of wheat. Okay. And this Candu is very. Soil is very rich. And so it's really a terrible story. They lived on the edge of poverty, and that was instilled in us growing up. And my grandmother, there would be, thrashing crews that came through, and this is in northern North Dakota. The thrashing crews would come in, and they'd harvest all the wheat, and then disappear. My grandmother cooked for 40 people every day, and my dad helped washing dishes and stuff like that. So
back then, they really work hard, right?
Yeah.
And what happened to the kids today?
Well, I have one daughter, and we've managed helicopter, way too much.
You manage a helicopter?
No, we were helicopter parents.
Oh, how does that work?
Well, you kind of cushion every blow.
Is that what they call it, helicopter parents?
Yeah, so you go from, you've heard of the Tiger Mom.
Okay.
We kind of buffered everything tough along the way. Okay. She's turned out to be, my daughter's adopted as an infant. She has a heart of gold. She writes very well. She finished college, but she's not sure what she's going to do.
So how did you afford law school with parents, grandparents, basically on poverty almost?
Yeah, well, my dad pulled himself up by the bootstraps. He used the GI Bill to go to college in Bemidji, Minnesota.
Okay.
And then my mother was from the same area. Okay. And so he was drafted in the middle of trying to go to school, and he was going to have to drop out when he got drafted. Yes. He went over on the Queen Mary to Europe. Okay. And if I can just finish this one story, you're talking about getting shot. He said he was in the snow. He found out later after he got shot in Belgium in the middle of the winter. He was there for about 10 hours. And
he didn't know he was shot?
Well, he just passed out and thought he was a goner.
You bring that up. There was a story about an Iraqi vet who was, he had a hatchet or a dagger in his skull, and he didn't realize he had it there until somebody pointed it out.
Whoa.
Because of the adrenaline, what do they call it? The adrenaline. Adrenaline was going, and he didn't realize until somebody said, "You got a knife in your head." So
yeah, my dad was carrying a radio. He was a radio man, and he was trying to carry his weapon. But the most The only thing he really told me about fighting in Europe was when the landing craft took them up to the beach, they couldn't go in very far. Then he said he was a farm kid from Minnesota, but he didn't swim.
Gotcha.
And so when they let him off, he said he was scared to death, not of enemy fire, but with that thing on his back of slipping into the water and drowning. And he said,
heavy.
and he said that all around him there were probably 2 or 3 guys that drowned, didn't even get shot.
Yeah, back then everything was heavy. Now everything is light.
Right, right.
But how come you didn't make it to the military?
Well, my draft number was 373. I would last draft was draft calling number was 1971, and I was in college, and my number was 373. My mother was very upset because my brother went on 3 tours in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
And my mother kind of became an alcoholic over the whole thing. And remember, we watched the Vietnam War, in full.
TV, first time any war was on TV.
Right, and it was gruesome, and, guys were just, 50,000 people, 52,000 people lost. And so my brother, of all things, he's a real smart ass. He signed up again and again, and then he got he got a cush job. Very charming guy, and he
until you piss him off.
Yeah, well, he used to tell me things like, my brother Rob, that Alan, you have no idea what it's like to be good looking.
What happened to you?
And to this day, he's still good looking. He's almost 80 years old, and he goes to weddings, and all the women line up to dance with him.
Oh, beautiful.
Very charmed life, huh?
See, that's what happens when you serve in the military. You get all brave.
So anyway, my other brother was a merchant marine, and he was a third mate on a ship that went into Saigon. I guess there's a port there.
Did you feel left out, though? Is that, you got 2 brothers?
2 brothers.
Any sisters?
No.
Okay. Did you feel left out that your brothers were all military and you weren't?
Well, at the time, that was 1971, so it was
Woodstock.
So it was a very difficult time for my parents, especially, and I was until I went to college the first year, freshman 71. I was in that house with my mother anguishing over my brother.
Yeah.
So he finally got a cush job as a military policeman driving around an adjutant general.
Right.
And then he felt guilty that he had such a cush job. And so as a military policeman, he volunteered to patrol the pipeline.
Yeah.
I guess they're out to the airport, big fuel pipeline. And then when my mother heard that, whoa, she just about went out of her mind. They're full of VC out there. And
They used to have, I think they call them tunnel rats.
Right.
They go into tunnels and clear it with a, back then I think it was a 45. I think that's what they had. I'm not positive.
Right.
Because now they have I forget what type of handgun they had back in the Vietnam days, but they used to go and clear tunnels with a sidearm.
Right.
That was a very dangerous job, I heard.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it. I read some descriptions of that in a book by Mike Conley, who writes murder mysteries and stuff, and that's what he did in Vietnam. And one chapter, he was quite vivid about what went on down there and how tough it was mentally to survive. Anyway, so my dad got through the military, but he was still affected by this horrible poverty. And so northern Minnesota had absolutely no economic opportunity there at all.
Right.
And
it was cold.
Well, it's a miserable friggin' place. So my parents, sorry, Tim.
No, it did. It actually is. I've been there. Yeah, it is actually miserable.
So my mother was also a teacher.
Okay.
And when my dad was on the repair, he was in a hospital for 6 months in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but he was discharged and somehow he was in Chicago. My mother and he went to the same high school, but they didn't connect at all. And they met at a theater in Chicago, totally independently, and they started dating, got married.
Okay.
So she came from a more affluent family. They had a violin and their own farm and a piano. So
When did you get out here to Vegas?
I came here right after law school.
What law school did you go to, by the way?
University of San Francisco.
Ah, it's nice and warm over there.
Well, as Mark Twain said, the warmest or the coldest summer he ever spent was a winter in San Francisco. Actually, the other opposite of that, but it's foggy in July.
Yeah.
Everything comes off the bay, it's ugly. So,
okay.
So I lived there. USF was really a little bit too radical for me. I didn't know what the National Lawyers Guild was, but very activist school. Most of the kids were from the East Coast. I was a West Coast hick, and it showed. I got here because my brother Doug in the Merchant Marine made a lot of money and saved it up and bought apartments in Reno, and he would not do that and buy them in California because he hated taxes. He hated California regulations.
Loves taxes?
Well, this guy, he's still alive today, did very well off of his real estate stuff.
Okay.
So he had apartments up there and he kept buying and buying and buying. So in the summers when he was in, I would go up there and he and I would paint them.
Okay.
I wasn't very crazy about heights, but we were up on ladders and, painting 2-story buildings.
Okay.
And then when he wasn't there, he'd leave me a list and I painted the interior of his apartments.
Okay.
Then after I turned 21, so I did this.
Did you take the bar? Sorry, did you take the bar in California?
I did.
I heard this. The 3 hardest states to take the bar is New York, California, and Nevada.
Yeah. Well, the Nevada bar in those days was pretty unpredictably bad.
What's your bar number, by the way?
848.
Wow. Wow. You're under 1,000?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I think they're at what, 16 now? 1,000?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. Wow. 848, Jim. Yep. Jim, his bar number is 848.
Yeah, I know.
They're at about 16,000 right now. His bar number is 848.
Yeah, see,
How many times did it take you to pass the bar, though?
California first time and the first time here. But I didn't do well in law school. I'm not, I don't consider myself that bright.
But
I work hard.
You are, though. I am
but
sure.
You work hard. I like that.
Yeah. I'm sure look at his granny and his parents, where he came from. But I'm sure when you go in front of a judge and they say, Mr. Lefebvre, what's your bar number? And you say 848, probably every lawyer is looking at you, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
But see, what happened is we didn't have bar numbers originally, and they weren't assigned until 1987.
So it would have been lower.
Right. So but the way you got your bar number was when you paid your dues, if you paid them early, then you got the number. So there was a prominent lawyer around here, Sam Lionel, who just died at 103 a couple of years ago. Well, his bar number he was 103.
No, what's the last name?
Sam Lionel.
Oh, okay, Sam. Okay. All right.
He was from New York.
Okay.
But he changed his name when he came out here. It was a Russian name about that long.
Gotcha.
And anyway, Sam's bar number, because he's so cheap, he didn't pay his bar dues until he got a late notice. So his bar number was like 1,250.
Probably upset at him.
Yeah, it did. It
I
pissed him off.
So Mr. Lefebvre, are we done with your bio?
Yeah, well, I ran off at the mouth. Anyway, so I worked at Harrah's when Mr. Harrah was still alive. I was a cashier. And then I worked for the DA's office the 2 years between.
Who was DA back then?
Judge Larry Hicks was. His son is now, but Larry was first elected to office. He was probably 33, 34, something like that.
Okay.
And then he became the president of the state bar.
Okay.
And he was a perfect politician. He was a Republican, very patrician, but a very even-tempered kind of guy. Mm-hmm. I didn't see him until 1993. So I'm not going to tell you when, otherwise the people will be concerned that I'm still breathing. But so I saw Larry at the bar convention, and he remembered me. Okay. He was president. It was his deal. I was involved then in the middle of a battle we had here. A judge who now deceased, Jerry Whitehead, and I was on the Commission on Judicial Discipline.
I've heard of him.
And so we went through hell. He was doing lots of irregular things, and he had buddies on the Supreme Court.
It's good to have buddies on the Supreme Court.
Absolutely. Yeah, judges don't get to be judges by not knowing anybody. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the old guy, Al Gunderson, who was thankfully dead, he somehow founded
and just let me just correct you on that, because not all judges would fit that mold that you described, because there's some judges that don't know nobody and they won. There was a big boom.
Right.
Was it 22?
Yep.
Yeah.
20.
And before that, was it
right.
20?
Right.
Or 16, 18, somewhere like that?
Yeah, 14 was a big upset year too.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I worked for Larry. I couldn't get a job in that office because of everybody who applied had some local connection. I was just some schmuck from out of town. So suddenly something appeared out of thin air that a judge in Vegas was looking for a law clerk. Okay. And I'd only driven through once the year when Nixon resigned. And with camping trip with my brother. And anyway, so Paul Goldman, I flew down and I talked to him. Wonderful man. He was later removed from the bench, but he hired me on the spot, but I was so stupid I didn't realize it. And then he told me I had to carry a weapon. And so I thought that was pretty cool. So I flew back, gathered up my crap from San Francisco. This is just when Nancy Pelosi was big there on the scene. Moved from San Francisco, came down here, drove around looking for an apartment, stayed in Motel 6 for 3 nights, brought my own TV into the room because those were the days you had to feed quarters into them there and the magic fingers. Anyway, so become a law clerk, get qualified to carry concealed.
In the courthouse?
In the courthouse, right.
And who'd you clerk for?
A guy by the name of Paul Goldman.
Okay.
He was from Denver. He came here, very smart guy, incredibly smart. I could tell him what was on the calendar. He wanted nothing written from me. Unlike other judges, we had a judge, John Mendoza, and his poor law clerk just sat there typing until 9 o'clock every night. My judge gave me, a very social guy, so he gave me from 7:10 in the morning until 7:30 to tell him what was on the calendar and how how I thought he should rule. Okay. I was.
You got a long bio, Mr. Lefebvre.
I do. I know. I'll cut it off. That was a good hand. So anyway, then I practiced civil law exclusively.
Married, kids? You got the daughter.
I got one daughter.
Uh-huh.
My wife and I have been married since 1978.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Only been married once.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So my wife's been she's a low-key realtor. She bought and sold rental houses.
Okay.
We still have a couple of rental houses, but we're terrible at landlords because we never raised the rent, and now we got a tenant who's 89 and can't afford the rent, so we ain't doing nothing about it.
I'm gonna put a hobacle on your bio.
Okay, well that's
we need to get.
So we're gonna be here a minute.
Yeah, we're gonna get.
So Mr. Lefebvre, let's get right to the meat and gravy here. You ran twice, correct?
right,
In 2018, you ran for Supreme Court,
right,
and you're running now.
right.
So you ran to Nevada Supreme Court, and now you're running for a Clark County District Court judge. Based on your qualifications, do you think you're overqualified for this job?
No, because there are an awful lot of judges over there, I regret to say, are underqualified. And what my goal is to, if I'm elected, I hope to raise the standard of competence.
You're going to raise the bar.
I'm going to raise the bar.
Okay.
The newly appointed judges are assigned to civil cases for 2 years.
Okay.
Now, some of them think that they're going to get a split docket, criminal and civil, very quickly, but I don't think that's going to happen. That's what Judge Weiss has been
The
doing.
chief judge.
Chief judge.
Okay.
So, if a judge didn't know the law, or a judge is learning civil law on the job, the judge can't peer into a case, look into the file, ask to look at some depositions to see what's wrong with the case and why it's not settling. And that's what I hope to do. I don't want to be a settlement judge, but I'm going to rack up those cases for trial, and we're going to go lickety-split through them.
You made a good point. If a judge doesn't know the law, especially in civil, well, in criminal, you end up behind bars. And in civil, you lose a ton of money. You got to pay for appeal. You got to pay for your lawyer's time. You got to pay for filing motions and briefs and motion for reconsideration and all that stuff. Do you think an inadequate judge costs defendants a lot of money?
Both parties to the civil case, and if attorney's fees aren't available to the prevailing party, you can find yourself in the hole. Now, for rich people, it's a fun game. And, if it's Steve Wynn suing Donald Trump or something,
I'll go forever.
That'd go forever. And the lawyers are happy as can be, all that sort of stuff. But somebody who's a marginal business person, or even somebody that, say, got a terrible solar contractor on their roof and gets a mechanic's lien, they got to go hire a lawyer. They can try to go to court themselves, but attorney's fees are racked up very, very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And it's almost a death blow to small businesses, especially if they skimped and they got terrible insurance companies. And so that's a hazard of litigation that is actually heartbreaking.
What about an indecisive judge that can't make up their minds? And by the way, how long does the statute says before a judge needs to render a decision?
There's no real rule. They kind of work around that subject. So if a judge has something under submission, it's supposed to be decided in a year, or their paycheck can be withheld. But a lot of times, the judges.
Really?
Yeah, but there's a little trick.
Is there NRS to that?
I'll have to look.
So
it was in the Constitution, and
Yeah, I was going to say, okay.
let me try to clarify this. So if a judge doesn't render a decision within 12 months, their paycheck gets held up?
right. But the trick is, was the case submitted?
Because we're going to get some money off this.
It was the case submitted. So if you've been in front of the Nevada Supreme Court, at the end of the argument, the Chief Justice will say, "Thank you, counsel. The case is now submitted." So that starts the clock running for them. So you go over there and the judges say, "Thank you," and you leave. And they don't say the word submitted.
Oh, they have to say that. Could you ask them that? Is this case submitted?
Well, they know what you're trying to do, and
Maybe they won't.
well, the judges I'm complaining about wouldn't know that.
They wouldn't know it.
So I'll have to find it in the
They probably know it now after the show.
Right. There's also an equivalent California provision, which we copied 1901 or something like that.
19 when?
1901.
01.
Yeah, statute. Well, a lot of our statutes are very, very old, too. And they come from also territorial law.
Jim, you were on the panel asking questions of Judge Lefebvre. Anything that you missed that you wanted to...
The whole day, and I'm glad you segmented to that, too, because I didn't want to... Okay,
You
so...
don't want to cut me off?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, I'm the referee here, so.
No. Well, eventually, when you get elected, you're going to have to be. It's kind of a role of the judge, but you're going to have to be. So one of the things one of the things. Let me just back up. So you notice I've been looking at my phone. Okay, so 99% of most people, unfortunately, in today's society, here's how they do their research. They pull your name up, they type it in Google, and that's all the research they're going to do. Okay? So some of the stuff that I pulled up is that basically the majority of your experience is all civil. And most of it had to do with contractual law as far as contractors. So basically, as an attorney, you're really good at winning lawsuits and making construction companies pay, excuse my language, a shit ton of money. Okay, well, but now, if you get elected to this seat, now, supposedly in January, we'll see how that works out, it's going to be a split docket between civil and criminal law. So you've been very critical of your opponent in this race, that she doesn't have any civil experience, but doing my Google research, and I'm being facetious on that, but I don't see any criminal experience in your docket either. So, what are you going to do when you actually have to sit on the bench and oversee criminal cases, not just civil?
Right. That's a fair question. Criminal law, the rules governing procedure, etc., have not appreciably changed since Warren Burger left the Supreme Court around the time of Nixon. So Miranda, which was way back then, Miranda rights, that hasn't changed appreciably. There may be some demarcation lines that have changed in criminal procedure, but that law is basically static. Huh? The elements of murder are the same. The elements of first degree are the same. There are gun offenses that, change a little bit here and there. But the main focus of the criminal law is facts, not the law. Right. And in civil law, what you're trying to do is sift out the cases so that the facts all become known real quick without discovery, and you apply the law, which is pretty hard to find or to determine how it fits. In criminal law, it's all facts. The prosecutor generally, as every district attorney, I'm not taking a shot at Steve Wilson, only brings cases that they think they can win. And so they usually have the defendant in a real bad spot. And the cases plead out because they try the cases that they can really put the squeeze on somebody. And when they do that, the cases either plead out or there's a trial, right? While we're watching this Tellus thing going on, huh? So, but what law is there? Well, let's take the Tellus case. What law is
Just
there?
For clarification, you're talking about Robert Tellus, the former Clark County Public Administrator.
Right. I haven't watched any of the trial, but I've read some reports of it. So they say they got him 9 ways to Sunday. And so, he's ready to take a plea and he's crying. But, that's not the typical case. It emphasizes my point of what's going to convict him, the law or the facts. Okay. So criminal law is, and that's why you see in criminal law, there are so few written papers. You open a murder file and there's the indictment, and there's a Brady motion to make the other side give you stuff. There are no depositions taken. The defense goes in blind. So it's just a different emphasis, a motion to suppress. But those files are that tiny, and a regular civil case can grow to that in about 2 months. Huh?
Okay. So, and thank you for clarifying that. But answer this question for me, because perception is reality. And that's why I just keep pulling up all this Google stuff. So my perception, personally, is that, okay, so your background in civil, so basically you're just trying to suck as much money out of people as you can, which you're standing up for your client. Not holding that against you. But now as a judge, when you're on that bench, how are you going to not be biased and not be for that, yeah, let's just stick it to these construction companies or whatever the case may be?
I represented a lot of owners, and I was in a defensive position. I got this question last night. Most good lawyers do not want cases to drag on. And so I was always looking for ways to conclude the case by motions, which is written papers. And we went to a lot of arbitration. But as far as the money aspect of it, the people who were in it for the money are personal injury lawyers. No. Mine was hard hourly work, and there was always at 4:00, there was always 10 more things to do. And it creates a great deal of marital discord too. Lawyers are known to come home drunk. I didn't do that, but I was always trying to do that next email, that next piece of paper that had to be filed the next day, so that my morning wasn't hell. And one email turns into 6, turns into a phone call, etc. So I don't know. People accuse lawyers of being money hungry. I made a very presentable wage for many, many years. It wasn't I enjoyed having the large cases that I could build a snot out of, training other lawyers. But we never didn't settle a case or bring it to a conclusion more quickly because of the money that we thought we could squeeze another $250,000 out of somebody. And lawyers, and the economy's changed just very drastically, and lawyers know that. Huh?
Okay. So I just have one last question, and I'm sorry because Steve, despite popular belief, isn't able to sit in on the endorsement interview process. So I've had the opportunity to ask way more questions than Steve, and so I'm taking Steve's time up. But one last thing, question that I would like to ask. So, and this got brought up without disclosing something that I can't. So, Department 14, it's probably going to end up being a split docket.
I don't think so. I disagree with that.
Okay. I'm just going off hearsay.
Sure.
This is not something I know for sure. In January, where it'll be half civil, half criminal. Me personally, I don't think that should happen, period. I think that would eliminate a lot of the ambiguity that's going on. Like, hey, let's have a criminal document and a civil docket, and let's get the experts in there on that instead of having a split docket. I think that's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, well, we have a powerful chief judge now with vast powers. But when I was a law clerk and sat through trials and read sentencing reports, etc., my judge viewed himself as a constitutional officer, which, unlike California, our trial judges here are constitutional officers. And so he felt he couldn't. We had a chief judge back then who was toothless, and my judge just blew them all off. The whole idea of the split civil and criminal is because everybody wants the criminal cases for a break because the civil cases are so hard.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. That goes back to the previous statement that you made. Like, the criminal cases should be pretty cut and dry. Like, it's black or white. Like, it either is or it isn't. Now, civil is different.
Right.
Because the preponderance of evidence is different. Right.
Right. And when you look at these parties, let's say you have parties of equal bargaining power. They also probably both have a lot of money, and so all that's happening is money's going to go from one deep pocket to another, and this deep pocket can probably find more. That sounds like a crude thing to say, but in most instances, in a lot of, for instance, business court over there, nobody's child is going to be taken away from them. No kid's going to be sent to juvie. So it's really kind of like playing cards and then giving all the chips back. So civil law, see, one of the things that happens is the first thing a judge wants to do when he sees a large case is wants to know who the lawyers are. Okay. And then he wants to hear them to see who knows their case and who doesn't. Wow. And then he wants to figure out, if he's got two hotshot lawyers there, he wants to figure out why the case is still going on if the attorney's fees are racking up. Huh? Many times they're mismatched lawyers. And so a judge hopefully he has the parties in front of him frequently so he can look out there and finally see the client starting to show up, see which client shows up with that's a different way of approaching it too. Instead of having a cattle call like most of our courts, if you set cases on staggered times, like you have a sure time at 11 o'clock, clients are most likely going to show up, and you can really tell a lot from the interaction with the lawyers, either before or after the case is called and the parties leave the court. But you soon figure out where the weak link is. And the parties are in court because somebody has failed. There's been a failure of something, and that's why they're in court. Somebody's at fault, and you have to figure out who that is without prejudging the case. Yeah. And if it can't be resolved, just set it for trial, and let's have a trial. Huh? So I'm sorry that was almost as long-winded as mine.
Mr. Lefebvre, how long have you been practicing law in the state?
Well, I hope they're not prejudiced by this. I've been 42 years.
42 years.
Right.
And in that 42 years, what boards have you sat on?
In the 90s, I was on the Nevada Commission on Judicial Discipline.
How was that board?
It had nothing back then.
Because they don't do their job now. I mean, I send them like 40 complaints, and I'll be lucky if 2 get looked at.
Yeah, the commission is difficult because it doesn't have a steady funding source. Mm-hmm. And so during the Whitehead case...
Is that why they dismiss cases, because of lack of funding, not because of the merits of the case?
There's a lot of funding. We went from a budget of $30,000 to $350,000.
I think it was deliberately done so judges won't get disciplined for wrongdoing.
The Nevada Constitution structures it to be weak. It's a branch of the. It is a court of judicial of performance. It's called a court. The judges in the state hate hearing from the commission. It used to be that the Supreme Court would appoint 2 members, or at least 1, to sit on the commission. And then they backed off of that, and they would seek to have 2 judges who then could keep a lid on what happened.
So it's like the fox watching the hen house then?
I wouldn't go that far. It's just that structurally it's...
But it's composed of judges and attorneys, correct?
Right. And
they all pay their dues to the state bar. Right. So they're all part of I call it a kebab.
Yeah, you could call it that. It's... Remember, we're an unsophisticated state. And so the funding, like I say, we had $30,000 until we had this massive Whitehead case, and then we got 320. And I would guess today they don't even get $1 million. And they don't revise their rules to make it more fair. They shouldn't have the intake guy have anything to do with prosecuting. So they're constantly having to beg and pick and choose, get lawyers down their fees so that they can pay special counsel to prosecute. Commission only meets 4 times a year.
By the time you forget who's on the board. You forget who's on the board from one meeting to the next.
Well,
okay, so judicial discipline is one. What's the others?
I was active in the bar on the Board of Bar Governors, which...
Nevada Governor's Bar.
Right. And the court, the bar is more of a labor union than you think, huh? We're kind of protectionistic. We have a discipline procedure and a department because we don't want the legislature to get involved. So I was on the Board of Governors for 2 years.
Pause real quick, though. When you said, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but for point of clarification, you don't want the legislature to get involved.
Right.
Now, so for me, that kind of throws up a red flag because now it's like you're running for judge. You don't want the legislature to get involved.
No, when he sat on the bar as an attorney.
Right.
Board of Governors attorney.
But still shouldn't at the same time, and I'm not, thank you for clarifying that, Steve. But so you don't want the legislature to be involved with judicial decisions at all? Like, can you clarify that for me?
In Nevada, we
You
only
said
have.
you were protective too.
Yeah,
It was a protective board.
I'm just saying that that's the nature of bar organizations.
And I'm just doing this for just education for the viewers and listeners. I'm not attacking you one way or the other. I just want people to, for once, if people would actually start paying attention to these conversations, like this is important stuff.
So the Board of Bar Governors, so I was there for 2 years, 98 to 2000. I got thrown off the board
How so?
because I lost an election. And then I rejoined
You lost. Okay.
in 2002. And then no, it was 2006.
And when you said election, the elective body that governs the board.
Right, the members elect the members of the board. So I got back on years later.
How often did they meet?
5 or 6 times a year. It's a deliberative body, but we're led around by the staff.
And what other boards?
Then I was president of the Board of Bar Governors of the State Bar in 2013 and 2014.
So you sat on the Board of Governors, you sat on the State Bar, you sat on Judicial Discipline. You ever sat on Judicial Selection Committee?
No.
Would you like to sit on that board?
Well, it's a lot more pleasant. It's a great way to make friends. You don't make friends sitting on judicial discipline.
Hey,
I suppose not.
Lefebvre, hey, I'm putting my guy in to run for the seat. You wanna, send him up to the governor for me? And what does Lefebvre say?
No comment on that one. I don't know why I never applied, but those were usually more elite people that applied to that were attracted to that.
So let me. Do you understand the process? The Judicial Selection Committee understand the constitutionality behind it?
I do.
The how the law was structured for that. Could you explain how because I'm having a hard time with it now. I mean, I thought I knew it. And all of a sudden I'm thrown off. Could you explain from the time that they send out media to the members of the bar saying that there's a vacancy and what they look for in the application process and in the interview process? I understand that there's a background check, financial, and any disciplinary actions. And I understand that there is financial check to see if they owe anybody anything. And in some cases, I understand that there's mental health and physical health. And then from the time that they deliberate in the room to figure out the names to send to the governor and the amount of names they send to the governor, could you just walk us through how this judicial selection process works so people could have a great understanding on how they arrive at sending names to the governor and how these people arrive raising their right hand and taking the oath of office and sitting on the bench to judge us?
Well, the first thing you have to know, and it gives you a clue immediately, is the Nevada open meeting law doesn't apply.
Does not apply.
Right.
At which part does it not apply?
None of it. As nice people now, they record because we're supposed to be all transparent and all
Live
that sort of
stream.
stuff.
They live stream it.
So they do that on the interview, but their deliberations, a lot of documents are screamed
Right,
away.
The deliberations are not open meeting, but the interview process is open meeting.
Right.
Unless they have a closed meeting. Let's say they found a disciplinary action in an attorney's profile, and they close the meeting because they don't want the general public to know about that, or there's some mental health problem or physical issue, and they close it off because they don't want the public to adjust. But other than that, the ordinary stuff, interviewing, the regular stuff, that's open to the public, correct?
Right.
They live stream it on their
Right.
On their,
All the
their
good
website.
stuff is closed.
The juicy stuff. The criminality stuff, like an attorney beat some cop up and then get arrested and all that stuff. Those are all closed. I get it. I sat through a few of those judicial selection processes as well, and they kicked us out a few times because of closed meeting, and they want to discuss the juicy stuff that we don't get.
Right.
So sorry, but I just wanted to clarify. Please continue.
Well, the structure is it was before we just had the governor appoint. And I think this came about in 1972 is when the dual constitutional provisions went to the voters twice, and they created discipline and selection. And so the selection in the Constitution, so that was a pretty major thing. It took away the governor's unilateral power of appointment, as the governor of California still has. So interesting. I mean, how the states have changed.
I thought there was a separation between the executive branch and judicial branch. Funny, it's not that way.
No. So the Chief Justice sits as the chairperson of the committee. There are two lawyers, preferably from North and South, who are permanent members. They do pay attention to political parties because they can't be the same political party. And then there's three public members nominated by the governor. And generally what happens is the lawyers intimidate the public members unless the public member, there's a Peter Guzman, who's the Latin Chamber of Commerce. He's not the type of guy that's going to be browbeaten. But a lot of governor's appointees just sit there silently.
They just follow the flock type deal.
Well, it's the same thing with
Probably why they
discipline.
won't put me on that board. I applied for that board a couple times, and the disciplinary board as well.
No, they couldn't let you on there.
No, because I cannot follow the flock. That's why they don't make me a jury. 3 times I got kicked off jury because I want to be the jury foreman.
No judge can stand a leader.
Sorry, please.
So
I
it's,
like that comment. No judge can stand the leader.
No judge can stand a leader.
That's classic right there.
so it's sketched out in the Constitution, and it says who the members are and how they're appointed. So the Constitution names the Chief Justice, whoever that is currently. Then the state bar gets to name their members, and then their temporary members, and the governor gets his 3.
Okay.
And so
What said his 3? What does that mean?
just 3 public members at large.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Okay. So the Constitution says that the Chief Justice shall be the chair of the commission.
Right.
And then the public members, as I say, kind of sit there quietly, some of them, if they're kind of shy. They advertise for the position, and then usually
whom they advertise
to the State Bar of Nevada. The
How
requirement
many
is
members on that bar?
16, 17,000, 18,000. They don't cut out the bar numbers of deceased people. So
Weren't you the president of that?
I was in 2013, 2014.
Okay.
So we control the appointments. One of my failings is that some of these people are long entrenched, and I didn't kick some of them
Mr.
off.
Lefebvre, what does that mean? You could control the appointments.
Well, on the Board of Governors, the appointments come up.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have the power to set the agenda. And so the appointments come up,
Mm-hmm.
And if you really don't want somebody to serve, you have to use your powers of persuasion to convince the board not to select somebody.
So you mean if I was an attorney and I'm in the state bar and I meet all the qualifications for district court judge, which is 10 years of practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
At least 2 in Nevada.
At least 2 in Nevada, and I want to submit my name for consideration. I can't turn in my application to do that. I can't turn my application in.
Oh no, it goes through all of them. If they advertise for a vacancy
mm-hmm.
or a reappointment,
mm-hmm.
goes before the board, and the board sifts through the application.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about judicial selection
and discipline.
Okay.
And so, as president of the bar, I could oppose some reappointments
mm-hmm.
because some people did it for prestige.
Mm-hmm.
One guy was the head of the board of our examiners, who decides which kid gets preference, and some stupid son passes the bar or not.
Okay.
And so we've had people who've served for 20 years. So my goal was always to get the entrenched out to the extent I could. But there's a lot of lobbying before the meetings.
We're still talking about the judicial selection.
Both.
Okay.
And selection. A lot of lobbying, external calls. I'm the managing partner of so-and-so. I'm going to sponsor your bar dinner. And, I'd really like to get John Johnson involved in bar things, and you have this appointment. Would you consider it?
So you're saying there's a lot of backroom deals happening?
There's a lot of backroom activity. It's a question of whether you're going to bow to it.
Activities.
Right.
But they're not deals yet, but they want them to be a deal.
Right. And most of the members of the Board of Bar Governors now, more than before, are fairly passive people. And so if you're really gunning for some appointment to get somebody either not reappointed or appointed, you can do that through powers of persuasion.
Okay, so you submitted your name to the selection committee, and where does that go from there?
The staff controls a lot. In advance of the meeting, you get a big bar book electronically. I don't know what it would be. You get all the applications, and then people who are motivated go through and see who they really want. And then it's just like politics, huh? Anytime 2 or more people gather together,
it's a riot.
You're going to have so some people on the board could care less who's on selection or discipline, and other people. And then what happens before the meeting, people start calling you and stuff. Mm-hmm. And when you're lobbied about a particular person, that's when your antenna goes up.
So a lot of these lawyers that go to these selection committees, they get a lot of references from the public, their own colleagues and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, they even get people to come down and speak on their behalf. Because I've sent letters for attorneys to get the appointment, and I've also testified on the record for either to get appointed or not get appointed. So that's also part of the process, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So what happens if there's only one applicant? What should the selection committee do at that time?
The judicial?
Judicial.
Oh, you're talking about the commission, not the Board of Governors.
No.
The Constitution. That's the Constitution. That's the law. Huh?
What does the Constitution say?
Constitution says, and from those applying, the commission shall forward 3 names. Shall.
Not may, not in case I flip a coin. Shall. What does shall mean?
Shall mean, that's an affirmative use of a term that's required, indicates something's mandatory.
Mandatory. So what happens if the commission comes up with these rules and say they want to submit one? How does that even work? And I know I'm just trying to understand this. So the law says stop at a red light. That's the law.
This is the Constitution we're talking about.
Okay.
Between friends, it's a Constitution.
The Constitution, which is greater than the Nevada revised statutes, right? Because that's the law of the land. And you can't change the Constitution unless you put it on the ballot, right? And then you have to have voters twice. You got to put it on the ballot to amend or change anything to do with the Constitution. Right. So I don't want to go through all that. So I'm going to make my rules. So the law says stop at a red light, but I made a rule and saying that you could go through the red light if there's nobody coming,
or you can roll.
Is the Constitution the document, or is the rules of the commission that they made up? Is that gospel? Which one holds?
You're trying
true?
to get to Rule 10 of their latest rules adopted June 18, 2021, and their Rule 10 says they have different choices. And then it also says if there's only one applicant or less than three in direct contravention of the Nevada Constitution, they'll pick one and pick that person and send them to the governor.
So is that unconstitutional?
Absolutely.
Then how come, why is these rules even written, and how come nobody's challenging it?
Well, there may be one. Maybe one.
Okay. I just wanted clarification. I want it on the record. So,
yeah.
So the Constitution, Nevada Constitution says the Judicial Selection Committee will send 3 names, not 1 name, not 2 names, but 3 names. And because they send less than 3 names in the past, does that make it right?
Right. Right. The laches doesn't apply to the Supreme Court. There's no waiver that says, well, you've done it so many times unconstitutionally that you kept it real quiet.
Right. So you're not setting precedents.
So why doesn't the governor say, hey, where's my 3 names?
Well,
unless that's the person they want.
Yeah, nothing.
It was a rhetorical question, Steve.
Nothing prohibits phone calls in this state.
So if the Constitution is being violated, what can we do about it?
There's going to have to be a suit filed, and it would have to be a suit within the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction. It would be called a writ of mandamus. It would call upon the court to take drastic steps and to say that anybody selected in contravention of the rules should be stripped of office. So it's a pretty drastic thing. And I don't think, I'll tell you what, I can't believe that our Chief Justice would, knowing, especially this one, or Chris Pickering, Alyssa Kaddish is...
she's my girl. I love Alyssa Kaddish.
She respects the law.
She does.
And herself.
She does.
Too much to go along with it.
To go along with some crap like that.
With expediency.
Yes.
Or a political deal that somebody else reveals to her, and they're saying, hey, get in line or get off the railroad. Okay,
so, all right. So there has to be some type of lawsuit, basically.
Right. This has to be, you've created some interest in it, but there has to be
a groundswell, basically.
Somebody has to pitch a fit. Mm-hmm. It has to be in the RJ. Mm-hmm. Channel 8 or somebody needs to figure out how we're getting away. I mean, if you can violate the Constitution in one way, why don't you violate it in a bunch of others?
So if and when that they send less than 3 names to the governor, and the governor picks from the less than 3 names, that makes that judge unconstitutional.
That's the way I would read
So that means every ruling that judge makes is unconstitutional.
Right, because that person sitting there is not really a judge. And she could have been somebody who just walked over the street, put on a black robe. And so what you would say about her rulings is that she lacks subject matter jurisdiction.
Even if she or he is appointed by the governor.
That would be my legal reasoning, that there's no subject matter jurisdiction because that person is a pretender judge.
Okay. Well, we got that out the way. Jim, you have anything else for Mr. Lefebvre?
No, actually, I don't have any more questions. Yeah, just a general statement. We've talked about a lot today, and I just want all the viewers and listeners to know that we did endorse you. And here's the thing. Like, the law is I think it's gotten way more complicated than it needed to be. I think that the average person should be able to understand half this stuff, but let's just be honest. Most people don't, myself included. And I've asked you some questions that you were very polite and kind of just gave me that look like, this guy.
I'm sorry if I gave you that impression.
I'm being truthful.
See, I'm supposed to be able to explain the laws so that it seems simple. That's what my role is as a lawyer.
But I just think one of the things that I just want the viewers and listeners to get across is it's important for all of us to at least have the opportunity to discuss these important issues with somebody who does understand the law at a much higher level than we do. And I just encourage the voters and listeners to actually start paying attention to this stuff, because we are a land of laws. And you just pointed out to Mr. Sanson very clearly, like, how the law is actually being violated. And but most viewers and listeners aren't paying attention to that, and they need to. And I just want to thank you very much for coming in and being willing to sit down for an hour and a half and discuss this stuff.
And I apologize for being verbose. And then when I get lost in my stories, and that's kind of embarrassing. But let me just say one thing, if I can. You drug it out of me practically how old I am. I'm very healthy. I have better cholesterol than anybody in this room, even though I'm fat. My parents both lived into their 90s and didn't lose their marbles until I'm 71.
You're younger than President Trump. You're younger than Shelley Berkeley. Don't worry about it. You're good to go.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, this is ancestral. We came from peasant stock, and we weren't European royalty or anything like that. And so I have longevity on both sides, and thank God, relatively disease-free. I don't know of anybody who has cancer in my family. Probably eat too well, obviously, but. So please don't not vote for me because you think I'm too old and I got all this gray hair.
Mr. Lefebvre, is there anything that we have not discussed that you wanted to put on the record?
No, I appreciate your questions. I hope you have me back sometime. You're both skilled questioners. You put me to the test on some things. Having to admit how I ran the bar for a year was kind of embarrassing, but I told you the way it was. Huh?
Yeah.
Mr. Lefebvre, could you look into the camera and tell folks why in the heck they should go and vote for you and make you the judge for department number 14?
We've been talking a lot about dockets, and so this Department 14 is one of 32 courts of general jurisdiction that have a criminal docket and a civil document. Right now, brand new baby judges get 2 years of punishment on the civil side because it's hard. And I don't mean to make light of the criminal cases, but they're much more streamlined. I want to elevate the practice and the reputation of our courts. It has sunk unbelievably in probably the last 15 years. In 2020, a whole bunch of 5 good judges were knocked off. You, the public, if you have to appear in court, are mostly going to be there on the civil side, unless you're a criminal or unless your kid's a criminal. You're going to be affected by the civil law. The guy who puts a mechanics lien on your house for the solar, any number of things when your kid gets expelled from school or disqualified from the football team and you have to go put some money together and go to court, and you will not get justice regardless of how nice the judge is and how nice she smiles or takes a picture. If the judge doesn't know the law, you're not going to get justice. And I'm hoping to elevate that. My platform has been that my opponent lacks the background. She practiced civil law from March until July of 2004. She's been a prosecutor. She hadn't been in the courtroom as a trial lawyer for 5 years. She was over there for 20 years, supposedly. She's a chief DA, but she does not know civil law. Anybody can throw people in jail. But with civil law, the only way you can get justice is with judges who know the law, have had experience with it, and want to do the right thing. Please vote for me.
Point of contact?
My website is Allen4, spelled out, department abbreviated DEP 14 judge at .com. And my phone number is 702-672-0572. My Gmail address is AJL, Alan James Lefebvre, at AJL414 AJL 414 spelled out at Gmail.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lefebvre, for coming on the program. Jim, thank you for dealing with me all the time. Folks, this is Steve Sanson with Veterans in Politics again, and I just wanted to point out a few things. Mr. Lefebvre is running for Department 14, and he's running against a judge that was the only candidate sent up to the the governor's office for appointment. Gregory Kamer, who's the vice chair of the Judicial Selection Committee, in a conversation I had with him, asked me, why am I so interested in Department 14? Mr. Kamer, I'm interested in Department 14 because I'm interested in fairness and law. And according to our Nevada Constitution, you shall send 3 names up to the governor. According to Gregory Kamer, they've been violating this Constitution since 2002. And nobody has never addressed it until now. They violated in 2002, they violated in 2010, they violated twice in 2012, they violated in 2018, they violated in 2022, and now they violate in 2024. Because you violated it so many times and normalized it, that doesn't make it right. What makes it right is that the Judicial Selection Committee shall send 3 names to the governor. Not 2 names, not 1 name, but 3 names. And it's discouraging to know a judicial department is breaking the law. Because you have these rules, that doesn't make it right. According to our Constitution, you have to amend the Constitution, you have to put it on the ballot twice so the people could change it, the people, the voters, and that we haven't seen that. The rules that you make to violate the Constitution is unconstitutional. Did I say that right?
Yep.
And it's a violation. And I think this needs to be addressed in court. And the governor needs to throw this back every time that a Judicial Selection Committee sends them less than 3 names. They need to throw it back and say, do it over again. And the proper way to do it, Gregory Kamer, the vice chair of Judicial Selection Committee, the proper way to do it is that you extend the deadline and open it up for more applicants so you could decide on 3 names, or you make the department for judge vacated so other lawyers could jump in the race and have a fair chance of winning that seat. You don't go and appoint the only applicant you have, say it's a rule, give it to the governor, and let that person have an advantage of being the incumbent, because that's exactly what you did. You made that person the incumbent. So this person is an unconstitutional judge ruling on cases that not even supposed to be there because you did it wrong. Now, granted, if you send 3 names and that's the person that you decided on by the governor, if the governor decided on that person, I wouldn't have anything to talk to you about. But the fact that you sent the only applicant to the governor, it makes me think and others think that there's some type of backroom deal, especially this applicant was a prosecutor and the governor is a former sheriff. So do the math. The Veterans in Politics has endorsed Alan Lefebvre for Department number 14. And we hope that anybody that's listening to this will go and vote for Alan Lefebvre for Department 14, because the person that's there is unconstitutional. Again, because the Judicial Selection Committee makes some rules that go against the Constitution, that does not make it right. Again, this is Steve Sanson, Jim Jones for Veterans in Politics. Until next time.